she whispered. "I haven't eaten so my kids could." Thinking no one would hear, but a biker in the corner did, and years later, he would still remember her face like it was carved into his soul. The diner sat just off the highway, a tired little place where neon lights buzzed louder than the conversations inside, where truckers came and went and nobody asked too many questions. And on that cold Tuesday night, Lena Carter pushed open the glass door with her shoulder, her two kids pressed close to her sides, as if the world outside might swallow them whole if they let go. The bell above the door chimed, and a few heads turned, not out of curiosity but habit, and then just as quickly turned away again, because people like Lena were easy to overlook. Worn jeans, a faded hoodie, hair tied back in a loose knot that had given up hours ago, and eyes that carried a kind of exhaustion no amount of sleep could fix. She guided her kids to a booth in the corner, the vinyl seat cracked and cold beneath them, her daughter climbing in first, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one missing eye, while her son slid in beside her, trying to act older than he was, trying not to show how hungry he felt. But his eyes gave him away, darting toward the counter where plates of food passed by like a cruel parade. Lena picked up the menu, though she already knew what she could afford, which wasn't much. And when the waitress came over with a tired smile and a pen tucked behind her ear, Lena spoke quickly, like if she hesitated even a second the truth might spill out. "2 kids' meals," she said, her voice steady in a way that took effort, and the waitress nodded, scribbling it down before glancing at Lena. "And for you?" she asked gently, and Lena shook her head with a small, practiced smile. "I'm not that hungry." It was the kind of lie that came easy after a while, the kind you told so often it started to feel like part of who you were, and the waitress didn't push, just gave her a look that said she understood more than she was saying before walking away. Across the diner, in a booth near the window, a man sat alone, his broad shoulders filling out a worn leather jacket, a half-finished cup of coffee in front of him, and a plate he hadn't touched in minutes, because he wasn't watching the food anymore. He was watching her. Marcus Kane, though most people called him Ridge, had spent most of his life noticing things other people ignored, little details that didn't add up, and right now, nothing about that corner booth sat right with him. He watched the way the boy tried to act casual but kept swallowing hard, the way the little girl leaned into her mother like she was her whole world, and the way Lena kept her hands folded in her lap, like if she reached for anything, she might not be able to stop. When the food arrived, the kids didn't wait. They dug in like it was the best meal they'd ever seen, and Lena smiled at them. Real this time, soft and warm, the kind of smile that only showed up when she forgot for a second how hard things were. And Ridge felt something shift in his chest at that, something he didn't have a name for anymore. He told himself to look away, to mind his own business, because that was easier, because getting involved always came with a cost, but he couldn't. Not when he saw the boy slow down halfway through his meal, glancing up at his mom, noticing she hadn't taken a single bite, and trying to push half his plate toward her like he thought she wouldn't notice. "I'm full," the boy said quietly, though his stomach betrayed him with a low growl, and Lena shook her head, sliding the plate back. "Eat," she said softly, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "You need it more than I do." The words were gentle, but there was something underneath them, something heavy, something that didn't belong in a place like this, and Ridge felt his jaw tighten as he picked up his coffee, taking a slow sip that had gone cold minutes ago. The waitress came back after a while, refilling drinks, and when she reached Lena's table, she hesitated just a second before asking again, quieter this time. "You sure you don't want anything? We've got some soup I can bring out real quick." And that's when it happened. Lena's composure cracked, just a little, just enough for the truth to slip through before she could catch it. "I haven't eaten so my kids could," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, like she was confessing something she wasn't supposed to say out loud. And for a moment, everything seemed to pause, the hum of the lights, the clatter of dishes, even the conversations at the counter fading into the background as the weight of her words settled into the room. She looked down immediately, like she wished she could take it back, like she hated being seen that way, vulnerable and exposed, and the waitress's expression softened, her eyes flicking toward the kitchen as if she was already trying to figure out how to help without making it obvious. But across the diner, Ridge didn't look away, not even for a second, because he had heard a lot of things in his life. Lies, excuses, promises that meant nothing, but that wasn't any of those. That was truth, raw and unfiltered, and it hit something deep inside him that he thought he had buried years ago. He leaned back slightly in his seat, studying her more carefully now, taking in the small details. The way her sleeves were pulled down to cover her wrists, the way her shoes were worn thin at the soles, the way she kept glancing at her kids like they were the only things tethering her to the ground. And he knew, without needing to ask, that this wasn't just a bad night. This was survival. This was someone holding everything together with nothing left to give. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus Ridge Kane felt something he hadn't expected to feel walking into that diner. A reason not to leave. He could have walked away that night like everyone else did, finished his coffee, paid his bill, and let her become just another face in a world full of quiet suffering. But something about the way she said, "I haven't eaten so my kids could," followed him out into the cold and refused to let go. Ridge stood beside his bike under the flickering diner sign long after the door had closed behind him, the low hum of the highway in the distance, his helmet hanging loose in his hand as he stared at nothing, because for the first time in years, his mind wasn't on the road ahead. It was stuck on that corner booth and the woman who tried so hard not to be seen. He told himself it wasn't his problem. He'd lived long enough to know where getting involved could lead. People had a way of pulling you into their storms, and storms didn't care who they destroyed on the way through. But still, he saw her son pushing that plate away, pretending to be full, and her sliding it back like she could feed him with nothing but willpower. He exhaled slowly, jaw tight, then made a decision that didn't feel like a decision at all. The next night, he was back at the diner before the sun had fully set, sitting in the same booth by the window, coffee untouched again, eyes drifting to the door every time it opened. He didn't know if she'd come back. People like her didn't have routines, they had survival patterns. But then, just as the sky turned a deeper shade of blue, the bell chimed, and there she was again, same worn hoodie, same tired eyes, same two kids holding on to her like she was the only steady thing in their world. She hesitated when she saw him this time, just for a second, like something in her recognized him, like she was trying to decide if he was a problem or not. But then she led her kids to the same booth anyway, like it was the only place that felt familiar. Ridge watched as she sat down, her daughter curling up beside her, her son trying not to stare at the menu like it held answers to problems bigger than food. And when the waitress came over, Lena gave the same order, almost word for word, like a script she couldn't change. 2 kids' meals, she said, her voice steady again, guarded, and when the question came, "And for you?" She didn't even hesitate this time. Nothing. Ridge stood up before he could second-guess himself, grabbed his coffee, and walked over, stopping at the edge of her table. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice calm, not demanding, but not unsure either. Lena looked up sharply, instinctively pulling her kids a little closer, her eyes scanning his face, his jacket, the quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. "I think you've got the wrong table," she said carefully. Ridge shook his head. "No, I've got the right one." There was a pause, heavy and uncertain, and then her son spoke before she could respond. "Are you a biker?" he asked, eyes wide, a mix of curiosity and awe breaking through the hunger. Ridge glanced at him, the corner of his mouth lifting just slightly. "Yeah," he said. "Something like that." Lena exhaled quietly, tension still in her shoulders, but curiosity creeping in now too. "Look," she said, lowering her voice, "if this is about last night, I didn't mean to. You don't owe me an explanation." Ridge cut in gently, pulling out the seat across from her and sitting down anyway. "And you don't owe me anything." She frowned at that, clearly not used to hearing it. "Then why are you here?" Ridge leaned back slightly, studying her in that same quiet, observant way. "Because people don't end up like this overnight," he said. "And I don't like pretending I didn't see what I saw." The words landed heavier than she expected, and for a moment, she didn't respond, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the table. "We're fine," she said finally, the automatic response of someone who had said it too many times. Ridge nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "You look it." There was no sarcasm in his voice, just honesty, and somehow that made it harder to argue. The waitress came over then, glancing between them, and before Lena could say anything, Ridge spoke. "Add another meal," he said, "and bring something for her too." Lena's head snapped toward him. "No," she said quickly, almost sharply. "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Ridge replied calmly. That's why I'm offering. I can't pay you back. I didn't say you had to. Her pride flared, visible in the way her posture straightened, in the way her eyes hardened just a little. People don't just do things for nothing, she said. Ridge held her gaze. Some do. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft clatter of dishes and the distant hum of the diner. And finally, slowly, Lena looked down, her defenses cracking just enough to let reality in. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, I'm still hungry," she whispered, barely audible. And that was it. That was the moment the fight left her shoulders. She closed her eyes briefly, then nodded once. "Okay," she said quietly, not looking at Rich. "Just this once." Ridge didn't respond with words, just gave a small nod of his own, like he understood that just this once was never just about the food. When the meals came, Lena hesitated at first, staring at the plate like it didn't belong to her, like taking that first bite meant admitting something she wasn't ready to admit. But then her son nudged her gently. "You should eat too," he said, echoing her own words from the night before, and that broke something open inside her. She picked up the fork, her hand trembling just slightly, and took a bite. Ridge looked away then, giving her that small piece of dignity, pretending to focus on his coffee while the moment passed. After a while, when the edge of hunger had softened and the kids were quieter, calmer, Lena spoke again. "My name's Lena," she said, still not quite meeting his eyes. "Ridge," he replied. She nodded slowly. "Why do you care?" she asked, the question simple but loaded with everything she'd been through. Ridge thought about it for a second, about the past he didn't talk about the people he couldn't help, about the ones who slipped through the cracks while everyone else looked away. "Because someone should have, a long time ago," he said finally. Lena studied him then, really looked at him, like she was trying to figure out if he was telling the truth or just another version of a lie she'd heard before, and for the first time, she didn't immediately look away. "I'm not a charity case," she said. "Didn't say you were." "Then what is this?" Ridge leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. "This," he said, "is me offering you a way out of just surviving." She let out a quiet, almost humorless laugh. "You make it sound simple." "It's not," he said, "but it's possible." Another pause, another moment where the world seemed to narrow down to just that table, that conversation, that fragile space between two people who didn't trust easily. "I don't even know you," Lena said. "You know enough," Ridge replied. "You know I showed up." That hit harder than she expected, and she didn't have an answer for it. Instead, she looked down at her kids, both of them eating, both of them safe for this moment, and something shifted in her expression. Not trust, not yet, but something close enough to let the next words come out. "And what happens if I say yes?" she asked quietly. Ridge didn't hesitate. "Then you meet some people," he said. "People who know how to take care of their own." Lena's brow furrowed slightly. "What kind of people?" Ridge's expression didn't change. "The kind who don't let kids go hungry," he said. And for the first time in a long time, Lena didn't immediately say no. She didn't say yes right away, and Ridge didn't expect her to, because trust wasn't something you handed over in a diner booth after 2 meals and a conversation. It was something you built slowly, carefully, especially when life had taught you that help usually came with a price. For a few days, nothing changed on the surface. Lena still came into the diner when she could, still ordered for her kids first, still hesitated before accepting anything for herself. But now Ridge was there more often than not, never hovering, never pushing, just present, like a steady line she could choose to cross or not. The kids warmed to him faster than she did. Her son asking questions about bikes and engines, her daughter eventually climbing into the booth beside him one afternoon, holding up her worn stuffed rabbit like it needed fixing, and Ridge, without a word, pulling a small sewing kit from his saddlebag and repairing the torn seam with hands that looked too rough for something so careful. Lena watched all of it with quiet suspicion at first, waiting for the moment it would shift, for the ask, for the catch, but it never came. Then one evening, as the sky darkened earlier than it should and the chill crept in through the diner windows, Ridge set his coffee down and said it again, simple and direct. "Come with me tonight." Lena looked up, tension flickering across her face. "I don't think that's a good idea." "You don't have to decide forever," he replied. "Just tonight." She hesitated, her eyes moving to her kids, then back to him. "Where?" "Somewhere warm," Ridge said. Somewhere you don't have to count every dollar before you breathe. The words settled into her like something dangerous, not because they were wrong, but because they were exactly what she wanted to believe. She exhaled slowly, then nodded once, more to herself than to him. Just tonight, she said. Ridge gave a small nod, like that was enough. The ride wasn't long, but it felt longer to Lena, every turn tightening the knot in her chest as they followed behind Ridge's bike in her aging car, the engine rattling like it might give up at any second. When they pulled up, she wasn't sure what she expected, but it wasn't this. The building was worn, like everything else in her life lately, but alive in a way she hadn't seen in a long time. Lights glowing from inside, the low hum of conversation, laughter that didn't sound forced. A few motorcycles were parked outside, chrome catching the dim light, and when Ridge stepped off his bike and walked toward the door, he didn't look back to see if she was following. He didn't need to. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the smell of food. Real food, the kind that filled a room and made your stomach respond before your mind could catch up. Conversations paused for a second when they walked in, eyes turning toward the unfamiliar faces, but there was no hostility, no suspicion, just curiosity, and something else Lena couldn't quite place. "This is Lena," Ridge said simply, his voice carrying just enough to shift the room's attention. "And her kids." That was all it took. A woman near the counter smiled and waved them over. "You guys eaten?" she asked, already reaching for plates before Lena could answer. "You don't have to," Lena started, instinct kicking in, but the woman just shook her head. "We don't let people go hungry here," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Someone pulled out chairs, another cleared space at a table, and before Lena fully understood what was happening, her kids were sitting down again, plates in front of them, their eyes wide in that way she hadn't seen in a long time. Not from hunger, but from disbelief. Ridge didn't sit with them right away. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching quietly, giving her space to take it in. Lena stood there for a moment, frozen between instinct and reality, waiting for the moment it would all unravel, for someone to ask for something in return, but instead, someone handed her a plate. "Eat," they said gently. And this time, she didn't argue. The first few days blurred together after that. What started as just one night turned into something else entirely. Not a handout, not charity, but something structured, something real. One of the women helped Lena update her resume, sitting with her at a worn wooden table, guiding her through it step by step like it mattered, like she mattered. Another member spent an afternoon fixing her car, not patching it just enough to run, but actually repairing what needed fixing, explaining each step to her son, who watched with wide-eyed fascination. Someone else offered to watch the kids after school, not out of obligation, but because, as they put it, that's what we do. And Ridge? He stayed in the background, never taking credit, never positioning himself as the reason any of it was happening. He just checked in, quietly, making sure the pieces were falling into place. Lena kept waiting for the shift, for the moment kindness turned into expectation, but it never came, and that confused her more than anything else. One night, after the kids had fallen asleep on a couch in the corner of the clubhouse, she found Ridge outside, leaning against his bike under the soft glow of a streetlight. "Why?" she asked, crossing her arms against the cold. Ridge glanced at her, then back at the quiet street. "Why what? Why all of this?" she said. "People don't just do this." Ridge was quiet for a moment, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Because someone did it for me once," he said finally. Lena frowned slightly. "And that's it?" "That's enough," he replied. She studied him, searching for something more, something hidden, but there was nothing there except truth, simple and steady. Weeks passed, and slowly, almost without her realizing it, Lena stopped bracing for the worst. She got a job, nothing glamorous, but steady, something she could build from. The fridge in her small apartment stayed full. The lights stayed on. Her kids laughed more, slept better, stopped asking quiet questions about whether they'd have to leave again. And one evening, she found herself back at the diner. The same booth, the same flickering lights, but everything felt different. The waitress recognized her, smiled in a way that was warmer now. "What can I get you?" she asked. Lena glanced at her kids, then back at the menu, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't calculate, didn't hesitate. 3 meals, she said. Then she paused, a small smile forming. and one for me. Her son looked up at her, surprised, then grinned. You're eating too? Lena nodded, her voice soft but certain. Yeah, she said. I think I am. Across the diner, Ridge sat in his usual spot, coffee in hand, watching quietly like he always did. He didn't interrupt, didn't step in, because he didn't need to. He had already done what he came to do. As Lena and her kids stood to leave, laughter trailing behind them, she glanced back, just for a second, and their eyes met. No words, just understanding. Ridge gave a small nod, and she returned it, then turned and walked out into the night. Not as someone barely holding on, but as someone who had found her footing again. And Ridge? He sat there a while longer, staring into his coffee, knowing one thing for certain. He would never forget her face, not because she was broken, but because she proved that even when someone has nothing left to give, they can still find a way to rise, if someone is willing to stand beside them long enough for them to believe it.